been about 24 hours since the 2017 Mr. Olympia contest ended, and in this short amount of time, there's been literally dozens of videos talking about the contest, giving various opinions, showing some of the competitors and interviews and so on. So I guess I'm a little late adding this to the mix, but I come from a unique perspective because I was the science editor for Joe Weider's Muscle and Fitness magazine for about 10 years, and I attended about 12 Mr. Olympia contests in person, where I actually wrote about the contest, and I covered it for Joe Weider's Muscle and Fitness magazine. So I have a kind of unique insight that a lot of the other people don't have. Of course, I also have not to mention the 55 years of bodybuilding experience I have. So I guess you could say that I can be considered an expert opinion on these competitors. So before I talk about the various competitors, let me make a couple of opening statements. First, I'm not going to say much at all about the female competitors. It's not out of disrespect for them. I think they all look terrific. They're great. However, when I covered contests for the print magazines, I only covered the men's contest with the exception of Miss Olympia. Miss Olympia, of course, was discontinued a couple of years ago. I've never really covered any of these bikini or fitness contests, so I don't consider it in my area of expertise as far as describing what to look for and all that type of thing. So again, I'm not going to be discussing those competitors. I congratulate all who won at the show. Unfortunately, I don't remember their names, but I'm sure you'll find them online. They all look terrific. They train hard, and they deserve the accolades that I'm sure they're going to get. So I also want to talk about the Olympia in general, in the sense that this is the 53rd year of the Olympia. And in all 53 years, strangely enough, there's only been 14 Mr. Olympia winners. Now, how could that be? How could there be only 14 winners over a course of 53 years? Well, the answer is simple. Some of the men won the title consecutively year after year after year. Notable in this regard was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who won 7 Mr. Olympia titles, his last title being won in 1980 in a controversial decision in Sydney, Australia. And then, of course, Lee Haney. He won it 8 times, and I actually covered several of his wins, and he was a deserving winner. Then there was Dorian Yates, who when I met him in I think it was 1990, at the Night of the Champions, he got second to a guy named Mohammed Benaziza. And I interviewed Dorian. He said to me, "My goal is to be the premier Mr. Olympia of the 90s. I want to win the Mr. Olympia through most of the 1990s." And this is exactly what he did, since he won the Mr. Olympia in the 90s no less than 6 times. Then, of course, you have the record holder. Actually, he tied Lee Haney, which is Ronnie Coleman, who won also 8 times. Now, I should also say that something you have to consider, I mentioned this in my last year's video about the Mr. Olympia, and this is important when you consider the judging techniques. The incumbent Mr. Olympia, in other words, the guy who already holds the title, already has, I would estimate, at least a 10-point edge even before he steps on stage, because he is the judging standard. The judges look at him and look at what kind of condition he's in, and the rest of the competitors are compared to him. Now, what this means in simple terms is if the incumbent or the title holder of the Mr. Olympia shows up in good shape, not necessarily improved, but in good enough shape to, let's say, win, he gets the title. The only way anyone can beat him is if somebody is noticeably better. They have to be, in other words, it's like the old boxing adage, you can't decision the champ, you have to knock him out. And, in this year's contest, did anyone knock out the incumbent title holder, which was Phil Heath? That's debatable, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But let's start out with the Classic Physique. Of course, the Classic Physique division was developed in response to a desire to see kind of smaller physiques, more reminiscent of the 70s and earlier. A lot of people are taken aback by some of the appearance of the professional bodybuilders today. These guys are walking around at 5'9", 5'10", weighing 270 pounds, and I'm not going to really discuss what they did to get that appearance. I'm sure a lot of you people already know that. It's a combination of genetics, training, And of course, there's a lot of anabolic drug use. I'm not going to get into the details there, but just to say that a lot of people don't like the appearance, and they started this classic physique division where they wear kind of old style posing trunks, and they basically are looking for the smaller, more sleek physiques. Again, reminiscent of the bodies of years ago, men like Frank Zane, Samir Bannout. These are the kind of guys that won years ago the Olympia, even to a certain extent Arnold, although Arnold would be, if he was in a classic physique, he'd be a very big classic physique competitor. Even at his best, he'd probably be marked down for having too much muscle. So I don't think Arnold would have competed in the classic physique. He would have stayed in regular bodybuilding. But anyway, that's the genesis of classic physique. And of course, there's always, it's another way for the bodybuilding federations to make money by charging entry fees and all that stuff. So let's put the cards on the table. That plays a large role in it too. In this video, I'm going to be brutally honest, and that plays a large role. Nothing wrong with that, though. I'm not going to talk about all the physique, classic physique guys. A couple of them I'll talk about. There was one guy named Arish Rabab. I think his name's Arish Rababa. He was 5'10", 210 pounds, 35 years of age. He needs a little more calves, a little more back width. He has, a little more arm separation between the biceps and triceps, but he has a good back. He's an Iran American. From what I understand, has a huge following on the various social medias. Then you have the last year's winner, which was Danny Hester, is a personal friend of mine. I've known him for over 30 years, and I'll say this much about Danny Hester, is in all the years I've known Danny Hester, which is 30 plus years, I've never seen this Filipino-American man ever be out of shape, ever, ever. I've never seen him looking sloppy, fat, not once, and that's a rarity. I've seen guys who either get very thin between contests or very fat, where they hardly resemble bodybuilders. Danny always looked like a bodybuilder. And this classic physique was a perfect foray for him because he has that classic physique. He wasn't a very big guy. Danny's only 5'6". He's 175 pounds. And of course, last year he turned out to be the first winner of the classic Olympia physique title. Like I say, you can't really find any weak points on the guy. Unfortunately, this time Danny dropped down to 5th place, and I think if I would analyze it, the main reason being that he's just a smaller guy. I mean, even in a division where they have smaller men than the pro bodybuilders, Danny was smaller than some of the other guys. But I will quickly add, and I know some will accuse me of being not objective, but I really am when I say this, and you can look at the photos to verify this. Danny was the most symmetrical guy in the whole contest, meaning if you look at it, the head-to-toe body, the balance of the muscles, the proportion, Danny was nearly perfect. He had every muscle in proportion. The only reason I think that he got 5th was because he was smaller. And, as a tribute to Danny is 48 years old. I mean, he's competing against guys like this guy Bumstead, Chris Bumstead, who's only 22 years old. He's less than half of Danny's age. So that's a tribute to Danny that he's able to maintain that kind of condition. But I would have to say for sure, the biggest story of the classic Olympia physique competition this year was the return of the great bodybuilder Kenneth Flex Wheeler, another old friend of mine. I met him, I think it was around 1991. And I interviewed him for the Weider magazines. And I remember he was very diffident in those days. I remember him saying to me, Jerry, I don't think I'm good enough to be a pro. I don't think I could ever make it. Which, looking back in retrospect, that was an amazing statement because it turns out Flex Wheeler turned out to be one of the greatest pros ever in bodybuilding history. I call him the uncrowned Mr. Olympia. I don't use that term lightly. There's only a couple of guys, in my opinion, that merit that term, uncrowned Mr. Olympia. They are Flex Wheeler, Kevin Lerone, Lee Labrada, and Sean Ray. And what I mean by that is all of these men could have won the Mr. Olympia. They were good enough. Lee Labrada actually won the prejudging of the 1990 Mr. Olympia held in Chicago, but they gave it to Lee Haney for the night show for reasons that are still obscure to this day. But any of these men could have won. Flex Wheeler at this particular contest, he's 5'10". He weighed 210. Now this, when he was a pro bodybuilder years ago, his contest weight averaged 240 pounds, so he's considerably smaller. Plus, remember, Flex Wheeler is now 52 years of age. Now, Sean Ray, in his commentary on the webcast, described Flex when he first walked on stage as Flex Wheeler Light, which I guess is a appropriate term because the Flex Wheeler that competed here was nothing compared to the way he looked as a pro. And of course, remember, there's a couple of things to take into account, though. First of all, Flex hasn't competed in 15 years, and there's a lot of comparisons to be made with Kevin Levroni's appearance last year when Kevin Levroni tried to make a comeback in the Open Mr. Olympia, kind of bombed out, didn't make the top 10, and a lot of it attributed to his lack of Kevin Levroni's lack of back thickness, and especially his lack of leg mass. And in my video last year, I talked about how Kevin Levroni, at age being over 50 years of age, there's an old adage that says the legs go first, and that's really true. When you get past 50, for some strange reason, you start to lose leg mass, even if you continue training. At the time I made that video, however, I did not know that Kevin had a knee injury, which actually prevented him from training his legs for the last 3 months of the contest, up to the contest. In other words, Kevin Levroni competed last year without even training his legs. So, he had a good excuse. Now, Flex's legs were really down this year. I mean, they were very muscular. He had cuts. He had a nice leg bicep. But, they were down compared to the way he was, especially his calves, when he was a pro bodybuilder. His arms and shoulders still look great. Again, doesn't have the over 20-inch arms he had as a pro bodybuilder, but that's to be expected. The man's 52 years of age. His shoulders look great. He was still able to do the leg split that he was famous for, where you go down in a leg split. That's why they called him Flex Wheeler, because he was flexible. But other things to take into account is that, as Flex himself said, he had a kidney transplant years ago. I think it was 2003, he had a kidney transplant after he was diagnosed with a severe genetic kidney disease called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, which can cause complete kidney failure. So he had a kidney transplant. He had 9 surgeries over the years. In 1994, he was in a car accident that almost killed him. When he grew up, he was severely abused as a child. He grew up in poverty. Flex has had a tough life. And let me tell you something, before anyone puts him down and says, well, Flex Wheeler didn't look anything like he did in the past. I know a lot of guys will be saying this. It takes a lot of balls, let me tell you, for a guy to train after all these years and come back and make an appearance on stage. And I think Flex should be given credit for that. He may not have won. He might not have even been in the winner's circle, but the man, he got in great shape. He's 52 years of age. And I think, his main objective, from what I understand, was to prove that he can get back in great shape. And in that sense, he was a winner. He did get back in great shape. So kudos to Ken Flex Wheeler. I have nothing but respect for the man, and I admire him. He's one of my friends. This is a guy, just to reel off some of his titles, he won, like I say, he won the 1992 USA, which I covered in the magazines. He won the Mr. California in 1989. He was second in the Mr. Olympia in 93, 98, 99. He was a 5 times Ironman pro. He was a 4 times winner of the Arnold Classic. The man is one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. So that's all I'm going to say. So let's basically, I'll give you the rundown of the winners. And just brief comments on them. The first place was a guy named Brian Ansley. He's 30 years old. He won $20,000. He was 4th last year. He was in his first contest. I mean, talk about genetics. In the very first contest, as Brian entered, he trained for it for only 3 weeks. He had never competed in bodybuilding, and he won the show. This is a controversial decision, his first place in the Classic, because a lot of people favored the second place man, a guy from Ontario, Canada, named Chris Bumstead. Chris is 22 years old. He's 6'1". He won $8,000. The guy is fantastic. I mean, Chris Bumstead has a great physique. Really, I was when I looked at this guy, I actually picked him out as the winner the first time I saw him walk on stage in this show. Why did he get second? A lot of people are asking that. Well, I'll tell you why. This is another fact that people don't realize. These major contests are largely won. This is going to like freak you out a little bit. Are largely won on back development. In other words, how complete, how cut, how detailed, how wide and thick your back is. This is what won the Mr. Olympia for Lee Haney. A lot of guys look better than Lee Haney from the front, but whenever they turn to the back, Lee Haney won. Same with Dorian Yates. Same with Ronnie Coleman. They won on the back. And I would say, in my opinion, the reason Breon Ansley was able to beat Chris Bumstead was because Breon had a thicker and wider back. The overall physique probably was Chris Bumstead. Chris Bumstead, again, looks terrific. I mean, this guy has a great future. At 22 years old, I have no doubt that this guy will definitely be probably a multiple classic physique winner in the future. Third was a guy named George Peterson. He has a good upper body. He's 33 years old. He won the 2016 NPC Classic Physique Contest. Fourth was a guy named Arish Rambar, who again has a pretty good following on social media. Nice physique, Iranian American. Follows the usual low carb diet as usual. Like many of the guys in the contest, he trains each muscle once a week. And then I also mentioned Danny Hester, who placed fifth. So that's about it for the classic physique. And again, this is a type of body that appeals to a lot of people, not overly big. The emphasis is on muscle definition, shape, and proportion. Let's move on to the actual Open Mr. Olympia contest. Now, the notes I took here, which I'm going to read off, I took during the prejudging. And if there's any changes between the prejudging and the night, I'll mention it. The first guy on stage was Rolly Winkler. Rolly is a perennial competitor. He's known for his gigantic shoulders and arms. He's 5'8". He holds 264 pounds. Now, Rolly has, in certain poses, he shares a trait with Dennis Wolf. In certain poses, his calves look passable. In other poses, they look kind of weak. So he needs to bring up his calves. He has great. His arms are just probably one of the best in the show. Just huge. He needs more separation in his thighs and his back. He was in definitely better condition this year than last year, which accounted for his higher placing, which I'll get to a little later. But the guy's a great bodybuilder. It's just that he doesn't have the aesthetics, I think, and this is why he has a little difficulty making the top three. He looks like a lot of muscle was just thrown on him. He's thick everywhere, but he doesn't have the aesthetics of a guy like Heath or some of the other guys. Johnny Jackson didn't place in the top six, but this is his 13th time in the Mr. Olympia. He announced that this was his last professional contest. He's 5'8", 235 pounds. I'm not going to comment on his physique other than to say that, this is one of the strongest bodybuilders. This is a genuinely strong bodybuilder who could toy with 500 pounds in the bench press. So Johnny Jackson, he has his huge traps. He exudes power. Great bodybuilder, and I wish him the best. I don't know the man personally. He came around after I stopped covering contests. The next guy on the stage was Nathan D'Asher. He's 5'9". He claims 275 pounds. He's got huge arms, wide lats, great shoulders, passable calves, but very good potential. His lats are a little bit high. Very good potential. In some poses, he looks exceptional. This guy could easily make the top six in the future. The next guy was a guy named Lucas. It looks like Osladil or something. 5'8", 230 pounds. He won the Arnold Brazil. That's how he got into this contest. He merited competition by winning the Arnold Brazil contest. He's got ripped thighs, huge hamstrings, ripped glutes, good back, good conditioning. Unfortunately, doesn't have the shape. Again, you have to have a certain aesthetic shape, rounded muscles to win the title. He doesn't really have it, I think, at this point, possibly in the future. Then you have the next guy was Lionel Baiki, who was in it last year. He needs calves. He has a thick upper body. His skin was a little bit too thick, like he was holding water on his skin. He's from France. And then you have Sean Roden. Sean Roden, of course, a lot of people like his physique. He does have the shape. Very symmetrical, head to toe body, 5'10", he's 250 pounds. Sean Roden, they keep talking about how, he's going to move up, but the guy is 42 years old. So I don't know how much time he has to win the title, because with each passing year, it gets harder and harder to maintain that kind of shape. This guy's already 42 years old, but he has wide shoulders. In the prejudging, his problem was he looked like he had a little water under the skin. And even more, the bigger problem than that was when he relaxed between poses, his stomach would stick out. He had that poochy stomach. And when he flexed his abs, they were shredded, deep shredded six-pack abs. But when he relaxed, they pooched out. He had that kind of belly look, and he wasn't conscious of it. He should have kind of maintained his flat stomach, though. He could have pulled it in the whole time. And a lot of people noticed it. I think it kind of hurt him. But I will say this much. He, for the night show, which was held the next 24 hours later at night, definitely lost some water, definitely improved. This allowed him to break into the top 6, and I think it was deservedly. The next guy is an interesting case. This was Josh Lerenowitz, probably mispronouncing his name. He's from Australia. He has, again, slightly distended. He was 5'10", 270 pounds. He's 33 years old. He qualified for this contest by winning the Tampa Pro. He's got a huge upper body. From what I understand, he's been more cut in past contests. When he won the Tampa Pro, he was considerably more cut, had a little bit of water retention for this one. Of course, his big story was he was the guy that discovered he was staying with the pro bodybuilder Dallas McCarver. He's the actual guy who discovered McCarver's body, which is, of course, a very tragic event. And a lot of the commentators talked about how, it was probably heavy on Josh's mind, where he probably had a little bit of trouble concentrating for the contest. I'm not sure I agree with that type of assessment, because, you could turn it around, where you could have that type of mindset where you could say, I feel terrible. One of my best friends just died, but I'm gonna train really hard because I know this is what he wanted me to do. So you can use the tragedy as an impetus to actually drive you to train harder. I don't buy this stuff about how, and they said this with Flex Lewis too. He was also good friends with Dallas McCarver. How the death of McCarver might have adversely affected training. I don't accept that. I think that these guys have the mindset to turn it around and use it again as a drive to train even harder in memory of Dallas McCarver. I think that's the way it really works. The next guy is a personal favorite of mine. I don't know the man personally, but I love his personality. Cedric McMillan, of course, he fooled around with Arnold on stage when he won the Arnold contest last year. He's got a great personality. This time when they presented his trophy, the guy who presented was standing away, and Cedric pulled him over and gave him a hug. Cedric took his placing. I think he got 10th place. I'll get to that later. But he didn't show any malice. No drop face. The guy's got a really good personality. I've never met him, but I have a funny feeling I'd really like this guy. And he's a big guy. He's 6'1", 280 pounds. He's 40 years old. He needs a little calves. He wasn't really ripped for this show. He's got a great back. I mean, when this guy comes in shape, when he comes in 100%, this guy is hard to beat. And I would list him as one of the guys who have the actual potential to beat Phil Heath. He's got all the tools to do it. So anyway, of course, he first became well known after winning the New York Pro Show back in 2012. Next guy is a guy named Jeff Beckham. Light. He's got a little bit light on the pecs. His arms aren't as big as some of the others. And then after him, I'm just reading them in order of how they appeared on the stage in the prejudging. The next one was, and I'm going to say his real name is Mamdou Elessabe, I believe it is. But he's better known as Big Ramy, and this description fits. This is a big, big man. This guy's 5'10", 295 pounds. He's 33 years of age. He was born in Egypt. He now trains in Kuwait. I mean, 295 pounds at 5'10". Consider Arnold at his best. Arnold Schwarzenegger was just under 6'1", 235 pounds. This guy's 5'10", 295. Now, in the past, and I said this last year, I think his big problem was his symmetry and proportions were off. The guy, Big Ramy, had gigantic thighs that made his calves literally look like sticks. He had that lollipop look. However, this year, to his credit, I, I I don't know who he worked with, but or whose training routines he followed. But the very first thing I noticed, his calves were in much better proportion to his thighs, and he had a tremendously overall harder appearance. He was one of the most improved guys. In fact, I would give, if there was an award for most improved for this year's Olympia, Big Ramy gets it without a doubt, in my opinion, without a doubt. So he turned he now Big Ramy turned pro after only 3 years of training. So this guy is another genetic uh, genetic individual. This guy has gained since he began training. I think in the first year or so, or 2 years, this guy gained 80 pounds of muscle. Talk about genetics. This is the kind of guy that's hard to beat. As a matter of fact, the truth of the matter is, going towards the end, after the prejudging, I had a tough time deciding who really won between him and Heath. It was that close. In certain poses, Heath beat him, and in certain poses, Ramy just destroyed Heath. And when they stood together, you know, Phil Heath is not a little guy. And yet, when he stood next to Big Ramy, he looked like a tiny little midget. He looked so small. I mean, Ramy's shoulders took up almost the whole stage. This guy is one big monster, let me tell you. The next guy was a guy named Gerald Williams, 5'9", 240 pounds. He's a little weak on the arms. He's got a great physique, but he's not really in contention for this title. Great physique. And let me tell you, just to get to the Olympia stage, you got to be pretty good. You have to win a couple of contests. So I don't mean to put down any guy who competed. They're all great. Just to make it to that stage, you have to be a top bodybuilder. So when I say that he's not at the level, I'm saying I'm comparing to the top 6 guys. That's all I mean by that. Victor Martinez is a terrific guy. I met him. One of the nicest bodybuilders I've ever met. This guy's had a lot of adversity in his life also. He always comes back. He's 5'9", he's 240 pounds. His legs were a little bit off. He was in much better shape than last year. I think he should have won the O back in 2007. He's another guy that should have been Mr. Olympia back in 2007. Unfortunately, Victor has kind of fallen back. He still has a great physique, and what else can I say about him? The next guy, Brandon Curry, I met him I think it was about 10 years ago, and I just seen him in one contest. And when I was introduced to him, I told him on the spot, I said, I think one day you're going to be one of the top professional bodybuilders. And this was 10 years ago. And my prediction came true because, of course, Brandon recently won. He won the Arnold Classic Brazil, Australia, and New Zealand contest. One of the shows he actually beat out Dallas McCarver. So Brandon Curry, he's 5'7.5". He's 252 pounds. I believe he trained in Kuwait for this contest. He has 4 kids. I mean, the guy trained. The guy's terrific. I mean, he was he was a 2008 he was a 2008 USA champ. In 2011, he was 8th place in the Olympia. Next guy is very controversial. The next guy, William Bonac. I thought that William Bonac impressed me last year. I considered him probably the best conditioned guy in the contest last year. And I'll say it again this year. William Bonac had the best conditioning of any man on stage. He had the most symmetrical of all the open Mr. Olympia physique competitors, head-to-toe body, no muscle weaknesses at all. The only problem with William Bonac is his height. He claims to be 5'7". He looks actually even shorter because of his muscle mass. He's 228 pounds. He's 35 years old. Of course, he was 5th last year. He's very, very thick. He started training at 13 years of age, and he trains each muscle once a week. But William Bonac, I would have had no problem with William Bonac winning this title. He had thick abs. I didn't see any pooch in his stomach at all. I didn't see any, bloated belly on the guy. Again, I think it's because he's a little bit shorter. But, if you went purely by physique conditioning, William Bonac was the winner. But we'll get to that in a minute. Next guy was going to be Michael Lockett, 5'10", 245. He had noticeable gyno. So this guy needs to discover aromatase inhibitors or do something to, drop that estrogen. The gyno was standing out like a sore thumb. He's got big calves. He needs more back detail. He's got shredded glutes. He needs more thigh sweep. Of course, the next guy is well known to all bodybuilding aficionados. And I'm talking about the Blade, Dexter Jackson, 5'7", 245 pounds, Mr. Olympia, 2008. He has 28 professional bodybuilding wins. I think he might hold a record there. He's 47 years old. He claimed at the news conference, he said that he was going to be in his best shape ever for this show. I'm sorry, but I have to disagree. Dexter, I've never seen Dexter out of shape in any contest he's ever entered. However, I would not say this was his best shape. I've seen him sharper in the past, but he was in good enough shape again to make the top six. And the man's 47 years old. He still has the leg mass. I think his intention is to keep competing. He doesn't have giant calves or anything like that. He's won the Arnold contest 5 times. And he's been competing as a pro since 1999. So he's one of the veterans on stage. I don't know how long Dexter intends to competing, but I would advise him that, when he hits age 50, he's going to have the same problems that Kevin Levrone had. And also he's going to have, Flex Wheeler, in that it's going to be hard to keep that leg size up. So, I don't know what Dexter's plans are, maybe a year or more. I think he could probably have at least another year in competition, but I think by age 50, he'd be well advised to probably retire before he starts to lose some of the refinement that he shows today. The man's still a great bodybuilder, though. In fact, he noticeably improved between the prejudging night show. He seemed to have shed some water, because quite frankly, after the prejudging, I didn't have him in the top 5. At night, however, I definitely had him in the top 5 because I noticed a definite harder appearance of Dexter. Great bodybuilders, no question about it. The next guy was Max Charles. Wide shoulders, he lacks torso detail, good separation. Again, some water retention. This is unavoidable, because, the guys are taking certain things. And, if they don't drop the water right by taking certain other things, they're going to have some residual water retention. The water retention can also be caused by a poor style of carbohydrate loading. If you don't do that right, it leaves a light sheen of water right under your skin, which shows up when you're on stage. So again, I wasn't there to interview the guys, so I don't know what they did wrong, but I did see a lot of water retention this year in a lot of the guys. What I did not see is a lot of bloated abdomens. I didn't see a couple of, like I say, Sean Roden, when he was relaxed in between poses, he had a little bit of a poochy stomach. By far the worst case of any bodybuilder of the 18 bodybuilders who competed, the worst case of bloated abdomen, ironically, was the champion. Phil Heath, in certain poses, looked like he was bloated. He had a bloated, pregnant stomach from the side. I mean, it was bloated like a pig. The guy had hard abs. And yes, he did have a small waist when he sucked it in, but from certain poses, this man was bloated as a house. I mean, let's talk about Phil Heath, since he was the last guy to pose. Phil Heath at 5'9", he came in at 252 pounds. He's 37 years of age. He's already won 6 Olympia titles. He was going for his 7th. What can I say about the guy? Other than the bloated stomach, he has, he's got a head-to-toe body. He has no apparent weak points at all. But I will say this much, and some people will argue with me. They argued with me when I said this last year. I looked at Heath very close this time, and I kind of compared him to last year. He hasn't made one iota of improvement, nothing at all. Did he get in shape? Yes. Did he deserve to win? Yes, by a slight margin. I felt he did deserve to win his 7th Mr. Olympia title. However, he was saying at the press conference that he improved. Bullshit. No improvement whatsoever. But to his defense, I will say this much. Knowing about the science of muscle growth, I have no doubt in my mind, and underscore this, put this in capital letters. I believe that Phil Heath has reached his genetic limit of muscle size. Phil Heath will never get any bigger than he is now. He's 37 years old. What he can do is the only changes he can make would be to somehow reduce that bloated abdomen he has and come in a little bit harder and ripped. And you know what? He's going to have to do that to continue to win. He wants to win his 8th. I think he once said he wants to win 10 in a row. I think that's going to be a little bit, he might squeak out the 8th win. That's going to be tough also. But, to get 10, that to me is highly doubtful because he's going to start, other people are going to improve. There could be some new guys on the scene that look harder and maybe even bigger than him. I don't think it's possible. He could make 10. He could be the all-time record holder in the Olympia. But, like I say, he's not going to get any bigger. He's reached his genetic limits, and this is something for all the other competitors to understand. The Heath you saw last night is the Heath you will see to the end of his competition days. He will either get worse or he'll get harder. He's never going to get bigger. That's it, done. So let's talk a little about the 212 division. This, of course, started out as a 2002 division years ago, and the original winner was David Henry, who was in this contest. Now, what can I say? Ahmed Ash, I think his name is Ashkenazi. He has a wide upper body. He's a little thick in the midsection. Needs more thigh cuts. He's 5'4", 212. Great upper body, though. Very wide back. David Henry, who, again, the original winner of this contest when it was in 2002, he was back in the contest at 42 years of age. He's weighed 210 pounds. He looked pretty good. I mean, unfortunately, not quite as good to make the top 2. But, the big question is, would James Flex Lewis, who has won this contest, I believe was 5 times previously, would he win this again? And, he entered. He did not look at his best. However, again, just like Phil Heath, they had the same thing. He had a head-to-toe body. I believe he won the 212 by virtue of his legs. His calves just outshadow everybody on stage. His calves are huge genetic calves. You can't build calves like Flex Lewis has. And I think that's what really, the fact that he wasn't really out of shape, I think that's what basically pushed him over the top to win his 6th 212-pound title. He's 5'5", 211 pounds. He's 33 years of age. When he was asked if he was going to come back and win again next year, he basically gave a vague answer. So I guess he's not sure at this point. But the guy is without a question, a very impressive bodybuilder. Jose Raymond was very, very good. Of course, the finishing placings, Flex Lewis won. He got 40 grand for winning. Second was Ahmed Ashkenazi. I'm not sure how much money he got. Third was Jose Raymond. Jose Ray was probably the hardest guy in the whole show. He was very hard, very grainy. He just didn't have the symmetry that Lewis had. But very, very strong bodybuilder from what I understand. Extremely powerful. He got third and won $10,000. David Henry got fourth with $5,000. And Derek Lumsford, a 24-year-old guy, he got fifth and won $3,000. So let's talk about the Olympia finals. The Olympia finals, I'll go from 10th to 1st. 10th place was Cedric McMillan. Again, showed no unhappiness about placing 10th. Very, very friendly and open. He got $16,000. Now, I just a side note, I attended the original the first Mr. Olympia was held in 1965, was won by Larry Scott, held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. I attended the second Mr. Olympia, also held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, 1966. The winner got a cheap crown that looked like it was from a margarine commercial, and he also got $1,000. So now think about that for a second. Larry Scott in 1966, for winning his second Olympia title, got $1,000 and a cheap phony crown. And the guy who got 10th this year got $16,000. I think it's kind of funny in a way. But anyway, the ninth place was Josh, looks like Larodowitz. I'm mispronouncing his name, excuse me. He got $19,000. He seemed pretty happy to make the top 10. Brandon Curry got 20,000. He got 8th place. I think he could have placed a little higher. Brandon Curry, very impressive physique. Nathan Diash, again, guy with tremendous potential. He got 7th place, 25,000. Rolly Winker got 35,000. He got 6th. Rolly definitely seemed very unhappy when he went out to accept the phony check they gave him and the what is it? Some sort of metal they put around his neck or something like that. Probably made of plastic, but he definitely was not a happy camper there with 6th place. Sean Roden squeezed into 5th, got 45,000. I didn't have Sean Roden in the top 5 after the prejudging, but he did something to harden up between the prejudging and the finals. He hardened up. He's got a great looking body, head to toe. The only problem is he's got to learn to kind of suck in that ab. Don't let it, that stomach, don't let it pooch out. Guy's a great, I don't know how many years he has. Like he says, he's 42 years old. I don't know how much time he has to win, but he has all the tools to win the Olympia. It all depends. It's a lot of factors. Dexter Jackson, the perennial champion, got 4th place, $55,000. Dexter, mildly happy with that. I think he expected to place higher. William Bonac, again got 3rd place, $100,000. To me, William Bonac could easily, again, as I said earlier, he could easily have been the winner. The most conditioned guy, the most symmetrical guy, best proportions, no weak points, 0. If you're judging a contest, no bloated abdomen, by the way. If you're judging a contest on pure bodybuilding, William Bonac wins. I mean, if you exclude the size factor, the height factor, William Bonac wins. I don't know if he'll ever win. He might suffer the same fate as Lila Brada and Sean Ray. Both of them should have won the Mr. Olympia, but they didn't because they weren't tall. They weren't tall. And I remember at a press conference years ago, I was at the press conference, and I asked them, Lila Brada was present, so was Sean Ray. And I said, listen, don't you think, guys, it would be better to have a lighter Mr. Olympia division? For example, let's say 200-pound division. At least you guys would have a more of a competitive chance of winning. Both Sean Ray and Lila Brada said no because it would detract from the prestige of the overall Mr. Olympia. I think it was Sean Ray who said there should only be one Mr. Olympia. I think in retrospect, both men would probably agree with me that, there should have been a 200-pound or let's say 212-pound class even back then. Of course, again, 2nd place. So that was a tight race between Phil Heath and Big Ramy. As I said, in some poses I had Big Ramy, and other poses I had Phil Heath. I think I could honestly say that if you were to take a poll, I would think that very few people in the crowd would have disagreed if Big Ramy had defeated Phil Heath and won the Mr. Olympia this year. He was that much improved. Again, I don't mean to be redundant, but I'm going to repeat. Big Ramy was the most improved bodybuilder from last year by far. By far. The man is huge. He had everything. He's a little bit blocky. He doesn't have the aesthetics of Phil Heath. That's probably why Phil Heath beat him. But, I mean, he could have easily have won. It was very close. He won $200,000 for second. Phil Heath wins his 7th Mr. Olympia title, $400,000. And I believe, again, Phil Heath will be trying out for a couple of more titles. He's 37 years old, still has a little bit of jet fuel left in him. Phil Heath, as a personal note, I don't like to really comment. I don't know Phil Heath very well, but I've watched a lot of his videos. I've seen his comments. I watched his statements at this year's press conference. I got to say, Phil Heath is not the most likable of the Mr. Olympias. I've known every Mr. Olympia since the first one, Larry Scott. I've known them all. And I got to tell you, there's only 2 Mr. Olympias that I find to be arrogant and unlikable. One of them might surprise you was Sergio Oliva, who won 3 times. Sergio Oliva, and I've talked to Sergio Oliva Jr. about this. He knows about this. Sergio Oliva was very nasty to me. I first met him when I was 14 years old. I asked him for an autograph, and his response was, "Get the fuck out of my face, kid." And the second 2 times I met him, it was similar experiences. I don't like Sergio Oliva as a man. as a bodybuilder, definitely one of the greatest bodybuilders ever. There's no question about it. Sergio Jr. could probably even emulate him. Sergio's a great guy, unlike his father, terrific personality. And as far as Phil Heath goes, Phil Heath comes across as arrogant and phony. I'm not going to go into the stories of my experience with Phil Heath. I could be wrong. Maybe if I had an extended conversation, I'd feel different. My feeling about him now is he's a kind of an arrogant guy. I don't really like him personally, but in commenting about him as a bodybuilder, he's the best. He's the king. He deserved the title. So I'll leave it at that. I know this is probably the longest video I've made here for Generation Iron, but I wanted to give you a little bit of side information that maybe you won't find in some of the many other plethora of videos that are already appearing about this contest. So, and by the way, if you ever want really solid evidence-based information on nutrition, supplements, exercise science, hormonal therapy, anti-aging research, fat loss techniques that really work, ergogenic aids, in-depth 40 to 50 pages every month. I guarantee you will learn something. I've had articles in my Applied Metabolics newsletter about how to prepare from a scientific point of view for physique contests, for bodybuilding contests, for natural contests. You know, these articles will, if you read them and follow the advice I give, you will reach your genetic potential. And if you have the genetic potential to win, you will win if you follow the information that I supply each month in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. That's www.appliedmetabolics.com. Subscribe today. And if you really want a winner, go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. They're wonderful, wonderful, loving animals. I mean, they're the best for. I can't think of any animal on earth that's more loyal. Possibly maybe a pig. I've never had a pig, but I heard they're pretty smart and good animals. But there's no animal more loyal than a dog. I love dogs. I can't imagine living without a dog. I mean, you know, they had these recent hurricanes. I swear to you, if I could have, I would have gone out there myself and just saved every dog I could. You know, I'd swim in the water, whatever I have to do, because these dogs are wonderful. So do yourself a favor. Go to your shelter, adopt a dog, take care. I'm sorry again for the length of this video, but, you know, I don't apologize to trolls who complain about videos, any video longer than 2 minutes. So, you know, you should be watching anyway. So take care.